Imagine, just for a second, standing in the center of this massive, brightly lit library.
Right, like a grand monumental space.
Yeah, exactly. The architecture just towering, the shelves stretch all the way up to the ceiling, and the tables are absolutely covered in open books, scrolls, intricate manuscripts.
Just overflowing with information.
Right. Every single inch of this place is packed. It's not hidden. It's not like buried in the dirt somewhere.
Hmm.
It is right there staring you right in the face.
But there's a catch, I'm guessing.
There is a terrifying catch. Every single word in this entire library is written in a language that no human being has spoken or understood in 1,400 years.
Wow. That is, it's a very specific, almost suffocating kind of haunting.
It really is. I mean, those books contain the loves, the laws, the jokes, the prayers of millions of people.
But you can't access any of it.
No. To you and to literally every single person alive, they are just pretty silent pictures. You have the ultimate treasure trove of human history right in your hands, but you are completely, totally locked out.
It's agonizing.
And that agonizing reality, that was the actual state of ancient Egyptian history for centuries.
It really is the absolute definition of a historical locked room mystery.
It is. So today we are taking you on a deep dive into an incredible set of source materials detailing the true origins of Egyptology.
And it's a fascinating origin.
Oh, absolutely. Our mission for you today is to explore how an entire civilization, one of the most text-obsessed cultures the world has ever seen, mind you, completely lost its voice.
And maybe more importantly, how it got that voice back.
Exactly. How a brutal intellectual rivalry, a staggeringly wrong assumption, and one young man's absolute feverish obsession finally brought that voice back.
It's a phenomenal story, honestly, mostly because it defies the way we usually think about history.
How do you mean?
Well, most historical echoes, they survive by pure blind luck,
Right, like a city getting buried under volcanic ash, like Pompeii.
Exactly. Or a single crumbling manuscript happens to survive in some damp monastery basement for 1,000 years.
Yeah, totally by chance.
Right, but this is a story about deliberately unsilencing a dead civilization.
Unsilencing. I like that.
Yeah, it's about reaching across this massive chasm of time to give 3 millennia of kings, scribes, and ordinary people their voices back.
Okay, well, let's unpack this, because the sheer scale of the historical problem here is, frankly, staggering.
It really is.
When you hear about the decipherment of the Rosetta Stone, you probably just picture, I don't know, a crossword puzzle being solved.
Right, a very dry academic exercise.
Yeah. Some guys in dusty coats found a magic decoder ring, matched symbol A to letter B, and everyone went home happy.
And that is so far from the truth.
Completely. The sources make it explicitly clear. This is a story of literal physical collapse. It's a story of madness and of scholars stumbling around the dark for hundreds of years.
And to really understand why it took so long, we'd first have to understand the silence itself.
Right.
Because ancient Egypt wasn't a society that just, left behind a few broken clay pots and called it a day.
Right. They wrote down literally everything.
Everything. For 3,000 years, this was a completely text-saturated culture.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It is. They recorded sweeping national histories, sure, but they also recorded the super mundane daily stuff.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, the price of grain in a local market.
Grain receipts?
Literally receipts, legal disputes over property lines, incredibly intimate love letters, medical recipes for curing a headache, complex death rituals. And they didn't just write this on papyrus that could blow away.
Right, they carved it into stone.
They carved this information into the very bedrock of their society. On the walls of temples, on the sides of obelisks taller than houses, on the insides of tombs deep underground.
But then eventually the lights just go out.
Exactly. As the Roman Empire takes over, and later as Christianity spreads and outlaws the old pagan religions, the knowledge of how to read hieroglyphs begins to fade.
Just kind of slowly evaporates.
Yeah. The last known dated hieroglyphic inscription was carved at the Temple of Philae in the late 4th century AD.
4th century.
And shortly after that, the last priest who actually knew what those little pictures meant took his final breath.
Wow.
And with him, the entire operating system for a 3,000-year-old civilization completely died.
That is so eerie. Because for the next 1,400 years, the script was still there.
Didn't wash away.
No. If you were a merchant traveling down the Nile in, say, the year 1000 AD, or a European explorer in the 1600s, you saw these monuments.
Undimmed. towering over the desert.
Yes, but they were functionally mute.
Think about the psychological weight of that for a second.
It's heavy.
Generation after generation of the most brilliant minds on the planet walked through those temples, looking up at those walls, and could not read a single syllable.
It's absolutely maddening. It really is like finding a perfectly preserved alien hard drive.
That's a really good way to frame it.
Right. You plug it into your computer, you can see thousands of file folders right there on your desktop. You know it holds the sum total of an advanced society.
Yeah.
But you lack the software to open a single one.
You can just stare at the icons.
Exactly. It is this pure agony of proximity. The information is right there, staring down at every traveler, but totally inaccessible.
That's a great way to put it. The data is right there, but it's totally inaccessible.
Which brings us to a massive pivot point in the sources.
Right.
If the writing was right there in plain sight, carved into stone, why in the world did it take 14 centuries for anyone to read it?
Well, because the scholars trying to solve the puzzle were trapped, and it was a trap of their own making.
The sources revealed that this delay wasn't just a lack of a translation key, right? It wasn't just missing data.
No, not at all.
For centuries, the greatest intellectuals in Europe and the Middle East operated under a fundamentally just disastrously incorrect assumption.
A total misconception.
They looked at hieroglyphs and believed they were looking at pure magic.
Ugh.
Or, at best, pure mystical symbolism.
They believed that each individual picture represented a whole deep philosophical idea, a concept.
Right.
They did not believe at all that the pictures represented phonetic sounds.
So if they saw a picture of a hawk, they didn't think, oh, maybe that makes a H sound.
No, they thought, this is the divine manifestation of solar supremacy.
Solar supremacy.
Right, exactly. What we are looking at here is the extreme danger of paradigm blindness.
Paradigm blindness.
Yeah. It's a concept that shows up over and over in the history of science. Being completely wrong about the fundamental nature of a problem prevents you from solving it.
No matter how smart you are.
Right. No matter how much raw genius you throw at the puzzle, if your premise is wrong, you're going nowhere.
I want to pause on this, though, because looking back from the 21st century, it is incredibly easy for us to sit here and just call those earlier scholars foolish.
Oh, for sure. Hindsight is 20/20.
We know about alphabets, we know how phonetics work, but honestly, it is so easy to fall into that exact same trap. Let's think about text message emojis today.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison. Where are you going with this?
Think about it. If I text you an image of a bumblebee, followed by an image of a green leaf, what is your brain going to assume I mean?
I'd assume you were talking about nature or gardening, or maybe telling me it's spring outside.
Right. You would look at the symbols and assume they convey vague thematic ideas based on the pictures themselves.
Because that's what pictures usually do.
Exactly. You would be completely blinded by the imagery. You wouldn't naturally assume I was spelling out a very specific phonetic English word. Bee plus leaf. Belief.
Ah, that is brilliant. Yes, you are using the images purely for their phonetic sound values, stripping away their visual meaning entirely.
Right. If I sent you bee and leaf, and you spent 10 years trying to philosophically connect the industrious nature of the insect to the photosynthesis of the plant,
I'd be completely lost.
You would be doing exactly what European scholars did with hieroglyphs for centuries.
And that is really not an exaggeration. What's fascinating here is how deeply this wrong idea took root.
Give me an example.
So in the 17th century, there was a brilliant Jesuit scholar named Athanasius Kircher.
Kircher.
He is actually often considered the founder of Egyptology, even though he was spectacularly wrong about almost everything.
That's a rough legacy.
Yeah. Kircher looked at a small grouping of hieroglyphs. A cartouche that we now know simply spelled out the phonetic name of a pharaoh, Apares.
Just a guy's name.
The name. And Kircher translated it as, and I quote, "The benefits of the divine Osiris are to be procured by means of sacred ceremonies and of the chain of the genie."
You have got to be kidding me.
Nope. That was his official translation.
He got an entire paragraph of mystical fantasy out of what was essentially just a guy's name tag.
Yes, because his foundational premise was totally flawed. He assumed it was a mystical code meant only for the initiated priests.
Wow.
And because of that paradigm blindness, the door stayed locked with an iron grip.
It just proves that raw intelligence isn't enough. Kircher was a genius.
He was a legitimate genius in other fields.
But he was applying his massive intellect to the entirely wrong framework. So if every genius on the planet was blinded by this emoji trap, what finally broke the deadlock?
Well, it required a literal physical key to be pulled from the dirt.
We are talking, of course, about the Rosetta Stone.
Yes, the big one.
The sources detail this moment so vividly. The year is 1799. Napoleon Bonaparte has invaded Egypt.
As one does.
Right. He brings his soldiers, but he also brings a whole army of savants, scientists, engineers, scholars, to just catalog the entire country.
It was a huge scientific expedition on top of a military one.
Yeah. His soldiers are rebuilding a fort near the town of Rosetta, or Rashid, in the Nile Delta. And a French officer named Pierre-François Bouchard notices a massive, heavy slab of dark gray granodiorite sticking out of a demolished wall.
And immediately they realize this isn't just a regular building block.
Crucially, this stone featured the exact same official decree carved into it 3 separate times in 3 different scripts.
The ultimate translation matrix.
Yes. At the top, you had ancient hieroglyphs. In the middle, a script called Demotic. And at the bottom, ancient Greek.
And that bottom section was the absolute earthquake.
Because they could read it.
Exactly. European scholars of the late 18th century could read ancient Greek in their sleep. They suddenly possessed a parallel text.
An answer key. You have the Greek at the bottom telling you exactly what the mysterious pictures at the top are supposed to be saying.
Precisely. The immediate shockwaves of this discovery across Europe were massive.
I can imagine.
Suddenly, these abstract, seemingly magical symbols could be tethered to a known readable language. But, and we have to make a really crucial distinction here, which the source material heavily emphasizes.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
Just because you have the answer key doesn't mean you know how the test was written.
You nailed it. Possessing the key is entirely different from knowing how to actually turn the lock inside the door.
Right.
Because that mystical assumption, the emoji trap we just talked about, it still lingered in the air.
People couldn't let it go.
Right. People had the parallel text, but they were still trying to forcefully map Greek words onto what they thought were magical, philosophical symbols. It was a complete mess.
I have to ask a dumb question here, though.
Go for it.
If they had the Greek text at the bottom, and they knew it was the exact same decree as the hieroglyphs at the top, why couldn't they just count the words?
Count the words.
Yeah, like find the first word in the Greek, map it to the first picture in the hieroglyphs, and just go one by one down the line. Boom, translation.
That is exactly what they tried to do first. It is the most logical approach.
Right.
But here is the massive problem they ran into, and it absolutely shattered their brains. The Greek section of the Rosetta Stone contains roughly 500 words.
Okay, 500 words?
The hieroglyphic section, which is missing some pieces at the top but is still largely there, contains over 1,400 symbols.
Wait, what?
Exactly. 500 words in Greek. 1,400 symbols in Egyptian.
Oh, wow. The math completely falls apart.
It falls apart entirely. You cannot map it one-to-one. It immediately proved that hieroglyphs were not a simple alphabet where one picture equals one word.
Right.
Nor were they a simple ideographic system. It was something vastly more complicated.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. You would think the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 meant pop the champagne, the ancients can speak.
You would think that.
But the actual breakthrough didn't happen for over 2 decades.
Over 20 years.
Over 20 years of the smartest people on Earth staring at the literal answer key and still failing the test. Why the massive delay?
Because to actually turn that key, the world needed a perfect storm. It wasn't just going to take a smart person. It required an unprecedented level of human obsession, a deeply bitter international rivalry, and a secret linguistic weapon.
Enter the 2 main figures of our deep dive. 2 men who could not have been more different.
Oil and water.
Seriously. On one side, we have Thomas Young, a brilliant English polymath. And on the other side, Jean-François Champollion, a French prodigy who had been quite literally obsessed with Egypt since his childhood.
2 very different minds colliding over the exact same ancient puzzle.
Let's look at Thomas Young first, because the sources paint an incredible picture of this guy.
Young was what you would call a genius generalist, a true polymath.
Yeah, he didn't just study languages.
Not at all. He is famous in physics for the double slit experiment, proving the wave theory of light.
Which is insane on its own.
Right. He worked on human vision, discovering how the lens of the eye changes shape. He worked on the physics of elasticity, which engineers still use today.
The guy was just dipping his toes into the deepest waters of basically every scientific field.
Exactly. And he treated the Rosetta Stone like just another fascinating mathematical puzzle to solve on his weekend.
Just a little hobby.
Yeah, brain teaser.
But Champollion was a completely different animal. The sources describe a feverish specialist.
He did not care about the wave theory of light.
No. He lived, breathed, and practically starved for ancient Egypt, to the exclusion of almost everything else in his life.
The obsession was total. There are stories of him essentially fainting from excitement just hearing about Egypt as a kid.
Just intense.
But he was also incredibly strategic. Champollion deliberately armed himself for this specific fight.
Right.
He didn't just study the history. He mastered multiple ancient languages: Arabic, Syriac, Chaldean, and crucially, his absolute secret weapon was Coptic.
Okay, Coptic. We need to explain what that is because it is the linchpin to this whole story.
Coptic is essentially the final late-stage descendant of the ancient Egyptian language.
Okay.
Long after the pharaohs were gone, the early Egyptian Christians, the Copts, kept speaking the language. But they stopped writing it in those confusing hieroglyphic pictures.
Right, because of the pagan associations problem.
Exactly. Instead, they just started writing their spoken Egyptian words using the Greek alphabet, plus a few extra signs for sounds the Greeks didn't have.
So it's like if we took modern spoken English, but suddenly decided to write all our words using the Russian Cyrillic alphabet.
That's a great analogy.
It sounds like English when you say it out loud, but it looks totally different on the page.
Exactly. Coptic survived for centuries purely in the liturgy of the Egyptian Christian church.
Right.
Champollion realized with brilliant intuition that the ghost of the ancient pharaoh's language was hiding right there inside Coptic.
Just hiding in plain sight.
Yes. If he learned Coptic from Egyptian priests living in Paris, he was essentially learning the vocabulary of Ramesses and Tutankhamun.
Just written in a different font.
Exactly.
That is an incredible advantage. But, as the sources point out, while Champollion is mastering Coptic, his English rival, Thomas Young, is making massive, earth-shattering early progress on the Rosetta Stone itself.
Young was formidable, and he made the foundational breakthrough.
Tell me about that.
So he looked at the hieroglyphs, and he looked at the Demotic script, which, by the way, we should probably clarify.
Yeah, what is Demotic?
Demotic was sort of the everyday cursive shorthand of ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphs were the formal print you carved on a temple wall, while Demotic was the messy cursive you used to write a receipt on a piece of papyrus.
Okay, got it. Formal versus informal.
Right. So Young noticed something crucial. In the hieroglyphic section, certain groups of symbols were circled by an oval ring. We call these cartouches.
Cartouche?
Yes. Young correctly guessed that these little oval rings were functioning like massive neon signs saying, hey, look here, this is a royal name.
He looked at the Greek text at the bottom, saw a name like Ptolemy repeated several times, and then looked up at the hieroglyphs and saw an oval cartouche repeated the exact same number of times.
Right. He deduced that the Egyptian version of Ptolemy must be inside those little ovals. But Young went one step further, which was his real stroke of genius.
What was that?
He suspected that because Ptolemy was a foreign Greek name, the Egyptians couldn't use their magical emoji symbols for it.
Because they didn't have a symbol for a Greek guy.
Exactly. They had to sound it out. They had to spell it phonetically.
So Young essentially cracks the door open. He says, hey guys, these specific ovals, they aren't magic. They are phonetic letters spelling out a Greek guy's name.
Exactly. But I want to ask you something about this based on the notes.
Okay.
Historically, the narrative always glorifies Champollion as the lone genius who solved the whole thing. Are we giving Champollion too much credit?
Oh, that's a good question.
Does the romantic lone genius myth rob Thomas Young of his rightful place in this story? Because without Young realizing that those cartouches were phonetic, Champollion might never have found his footing.
That is a completely fair challenge. If I'm reading the sources right, This was a genuine, bitter relay race.
It really was. If we connect this to the bigger picture of how scientific breakthroughs actually happen, they almost never occur in a vacuum by one solitary genius.
Right.
They require the friction of rivalry. They require one person to lay a brick so the next person can stand on it. Young built the absolute foundation. He made the vital structural leap.
But Young hit a wall, didn't he?
He did. Because he was a generalist, and because he didn't have Champollion's secret weapon, Coptic Young couldn't make sense of the grammar outside of those royal ovals. He proved the lock could be picked, but Champollion had forged the exact, highly specialized tool to actually pick it.
So Champollion takes Young's theory about the cartouches, and he begins this grueling, agonizingly slow climb of actually matching specific sounds to specific pictures.
He just goes to work on the royal names.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how he did this, because it is fascinating to me. Champollion meticulously compares the hieroglyphic version of the name Ptolemy with the hieroglyphic version of the name Cleopatra.
Right?
Now, we know both of those names in Greek. Ptolemaeus and Cleopatra.
And what do those two names have in common?
They share certain phonetic letters. They both have a P, a T, an O, and an L.
Exactly.
So Champollion looks at the cartouche for Ptolemy. Let's spell it out roughly. Ptolmys.
Okay.
The fourth symbol in that oval is a picture of a lion.
Okay, a lion.
Then he looks at the cartouche for Cleopatra. Kleopatra.
Right.
If the system is phonetic, the second symbol in Cleopatra should be the exact same picture as the fourth symbol in Ptolemy. They should both be the L sound.
And he looks, and the second symbol in Cleopatra's cartouche is a lion.
Boom. It matches perfectly. A lion equals the letter L.
It's just brilliant.
Then he checks the P sound. In Ptolemy, the first symbol is a little square box. In Cleopatra, the fifth symbol should be a P. He checks, and it's that exact same little square box.
It is the painstakingly beautiful scientific method at play.
Yes.
It's a process of constant cross-referencing, testing, and validation. Champollion is actively correcting some of the earlier, rougher guesses that Thomas Young had made.
He is proving, glyph by glyph, that the script absolutely undeniably carries sounds.
With every single letter of Cleopatra's name that he identifies, Champollion is driving a stake through the heart of that 1,400-year-old assumption.
Take that, Athanasius Kircher.
Right. He is proving that all the mystics were wrong. The pictures aren't floating, philosophical ideas. A lion isn't just the Neoplatonic concept of bravery or royalty in this context. It just represents the phonetic sound L.
But, and this is a massive, crushing but, in the source materials.
There's always a but.
There was still a crucial obstacle. A lingering, terrifying doubt that severely plagued Champollion even after this breakthrough.
The problem of foreign names.
Yes. Because Ptolemy and Cleopatra, as we said, were Greek rulers of Egypt. They came in after Alexander the Great. They were not native ancient Egyptians.
So the prevailing theory among scholars shifted.
They moved the goalposts.
They absolutely did. They said, okay, fine, Champollion. The Egyptians used a phonetic alphabet to spell out the names of their foreign Greek and Roman conquerors simply because they had no native magical symbols for them.
Right, they had to sound them out, like spelling out a foreign loanword.
Exactly. But, the scholars argued, the real, pure, ancient Egyptian language from thousands of years earlier...
The language of the pyramids.
Yes. That is still purely magical and symbolic.
They basically argue that the phonetic alphabet was just a modern, degraded hack they invented at the very end of their civilization to write down the names of their Greek bosses.
That was the theory.
Imagine sitting in your cramped, freezing Paris apartment, staring at these papers. Imagine the pure frustration of that.
It would drive you mad.
You've unlocked a few modern loanwords in a dictionary. You can read the equivalent of hamburger and internet. But the core language, the actual meat of an entire 3,000-year-old civilization, the poetry, the religion, the deep histories, it still looks entirely impenetrable.
You are so incredibly close, but the main door to the library is still padlocked shut.
It must have been intellectually torturous to have the key turn halfway in the lock and then completely jam.
Champollion genuinely feared that his phonetic alphabet was useless for anything older than the Greeks.
That crushing doubt hung heavy in the air until the morning of September 14, 1822.
The day everything changed.
When a package arrived in Paris that literally altered the course of human knowledge.
This is the turning point of the entire deep dive.
The sources detail this incredibly vividly. Champollion receives a package of fresh drawings from an architect friend of his, Jean-Nicolas Huyot, who had been traveling in Egypt.
Okay.
Huyot had sketched inscriptions from temple walls, but crucially, these inscriptions were not from the Rosetta Stone.
They are from somewhere else.
They were from much, much older temples, specifically the massive rock temple of Abu Simbel.
And this is the critical distinction we need to make. These were not foreign Greek or Roman names. The Temple of Abu Simbel was built deep in native antiquity.
Long, long before the Greeks ever set foot in Egypt.
Yes.
So Champollion sits down at his desk with these drawings. He is looking at inscriptions that he firmly believes are purely magical and symbolic. Let's walk through this exact moment of discovery with him because it is thrilling.
Let's do it.
Okay, picture this. Champollion is looking at a new cartouche, one of those royal ovals, from this deep ancient temple.
The first symbol inside the oval is a circle, a picture of the sun.
Now, Champollion doesn't just stare at the sun and think about divine light.
No, he pulls out his secret weapon, Coptic.
Right. He asks himself, what is the Coptic word for sun?
And because he spent years studying with priests, he knows the Coptic word for sun is Re, or Ra.
Right. So tentatively, he writes down the sound Ra.
The next sign in the cartouche is a specific unknown sign, It looks like a three-pronged shape. Let's leave a blank space for a second.
Okay, Ra, then a blank space. But following that middle sign at the very end of the cartouche are two identical signs, two symbols that look like folded pieces of cloth.
And Champollion recognizes those folded cloths.
He does. Because from deciphering the Greek name Ptolemy months earlier, he already knows that those specific identical signs represent the S sound.
So now look at what he has in front of him. Ra, a blank space, and then S.
Ra, blank, S, S. He stares at it. He knows the history of Egypt. He knows the dynasties. His brain fills in the blank. The middle sign, that three-pronged shape, is a symbol for birth or born of, which in Coptic is Mes. Yeah, it must be an M sound.
Ra, M-S-S. Ramesses.
A native Egyptian pharaoh, spelled out phonetically.
The magnitude of that single word, it is earth-shattering.
It changes everything.
It instantly, completely annihilated the 1,400-year-old assumption. The script wasn't purely symbolic, it was phonetic even in deep antiquity.
The native Egyptians used sounds to write their own names thousands of years before the Greeks ever arrived.
Right, and then what does he do?
Champollion quickly grabs another drawing from the pile, another cartouche. This one has a bird, an ibis, which represents the god Thoth, then the same middle M sign, then the S sign, Thoth, MS, Thutmose, another ancient pharaoh.
It wasn't a fluke. The system worked.
So what does this all mean? The scientific reality of the language was finally blindingly clear in Champollion's mind. And I know you wanted to explain exactly how it worked, because it wasn't just a simple ABC alphabet, was it?
No, and that is why it baffled people for centuries. Champollion realized that the ancient Egyptian language was a rich, incredibly complex, hybrid system.
A hybrid, okay.
It relied on three pillars at the exact same time. First, you have phonetic signs pictures that just represent sounds, like the lion for L.
Right, the alphabet part.
Second, you have logograms, pictures that actually just mean the thing they depict, like a picture of the sun actually meaning sun.
Okay, so it can be literal, too.
And then, the third pillar.
What was the third pillar?
Yeah.
Because we talked about the word count mismatch earlier, the 500 words versus 1,400 symbols. How did they handle all those extra symbols?
The third pillar was the stroke of genius. Determinatives.
Determinatives.
Because the Egyptians didn't use spaces between their words, they needed a way to tell the reader where one word ended and another began and what context to use.
Right, otherwise it's just a jumble of sounds.
Exactly. So they would spell out a word phonetically, and then at the very end of the word, they would stick a silent symbol, a determinative, that you didn't pronounce out loud, but it told your brain what category the word belonged to.
Wait, so you read the phonetic sounds out loud, but then your eye sees a picture of a man at the end, and your brain just categorizes it silently. Like, hey, the sounds you just read, that's a band's name.
Exactly.
That is brilliant. It's exactly like putting a hashtag at the end of a tweet.
Oh, that's perfect.
Right. If I write Apple hashtag tech, you know I'm talking about the computer company. If I write Apple hashtag fruit, you know I'm talking about a snack.
The hashtag is silent, but it determines the meaning.
That is a perfect modern analogy. The determinatives are ancient hashtags.
And when Champollion realized this hybrid system of sounds, logograms, and silent determinatives, the heavy door to the Library of Ancient Egypt was finally completely blown open. He possessed the operating system.
And the realization of what he had just done, the sheer weight of it, it was too much for one human body to handle. The sources describe an immense, immediate physical toll to this moment.
The rush of the breakthrough hits him like a literal freight train.
He stands up from his desk. He grabs his papers. He runs out of his cramped study. He sprints through the streets of Paris, pushing past people, running toward the nearby academic institute where his older brother Jacques Joseph works.
He's just sprinting.
He bursts into his brother's office, throws the papers on the desk, and shouts 3 words in French.
Je tiens mon affaire.
I've got it.
And immediately upon shouting those words, he collapses. He falls to the floor in a dead faint.
Wow.
And he remains essentially unconscious, completely bedridden and insensible for 5 solid days.
This raises an important question about the physical toll of intellectual obsession. How much can the human mind and nervous system endure when pushed to the absolute brink by a singular, life-consuming puzzle?
It sounds like a dramatized scene out of a Hollywood movie, doesn't it? The mad genius fainting at the exact moment of discovery.
It really does.
But the historical accounts are clear on this. We have to embrace the human drama of it because the physiology of obsession is real. The sheer, overwhelming dump of adrenaline from cracking a 1,400-year-old code literally knocked his nervous system offline.
And you have to remember the context. He didn't just solve a difficult math equation. In that single moment, looking at the word Ramesses, the silence broke.
The silence of millennia.
He suddenly heard the voices of millions of dead people speaking at once. The weight of 3 millennia of history crashing down on one man's shoulders in a split second. Of course he fainted.
5 days later, Champollion finally wakes up from his collapse. And the world he wakes up to is completely, forever changed.
Once he's recovered, the sources tell us that on September 27, 1822, Champollion publicly presents his monumental findings to the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres in Paris. This is his famous Lettre M. Dacier.
And sitting right there in the audience, listening to this young French upstart reveal the key to the universe, is his rival, Thomas Young.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall in that room. The tension must have been thick enough to cut with a knife.
Absolutely.
Young had to sit there and listen to the man who took his foundation and built the castle. But regardless of the personal rivalry, the floodgates had officially opened.
What we are looking at in that room in Paris is the literal founding moment of Egyptology.
The birth of a whole new field.
Once Champollion stood at the podium and explained the system, the phonetics, the logograms, the determinatives, the paradigm shifted overnight.
It wasn't magic anymore.
No. Those beautiful silent carvings on the temple walls stopped being mere decorations. They instantly became documents.
It is an incredible shift in human knowledge. Suddenly, millennia of silent papyri, tomb inscriptions, and massive stone walls could actually be read.
The daily reality of an entire lost world was instantly accessible again.
As you said earlier, the legal disputes over property lines, the intimate love letters, the medical texts, the desperate prayers to the gods, it all came rushing back into the light.
But Champollion's triumph came with a very heavy, deeply personal cost. Right. He gave a dead civilization its time back, but he was rapidly running out of his own time.
The final section of our source materials outlines this incredibly poignant end to his story.
It's quite sad, really.
Champollion finally, after a lifetime of studying from afar, got to actually travel to Egypt. He co-led a massive expedition there in 1828 and 1829.
He got to physically walk through the very temples he had deciphered from flat, black and white drawings in his cramped Paris study.
Imagine the feeling. He was walking the halls of Karnak, reading the walls in the original ancient language, translating aloud as he went.
Speaking a language nobody had spoken aloud in a millennium and a half, he was confirming his own life's work in real time.
But his health, which had always been fragile and further ruined by his obsessive overwork, finally failed him. He suffered a stroke and died shortly after returning to France in 1832.
He was only 41 years old.
41. His massive definitive grammar and dictionary of the Egyptian language had to be published posthumously by his brother.
There is a deep, profound poignancy to this trade-off. Champollion effectively traded his own life force for this work.
He really did.
The obsession consumed him entirely. He gave 3,000 years of history their voices back, and in return, he only got about a decade to enjoy his own triumph.
It is a poetic, almost tragic beauty. Imagine spending your entire youth, your entire adult life, starving in a room, staring at drawings, fighting through the doubt, fighting off rival scholars.
This sheer mental exhaustion.
And then finally, for one brief, shining moment, you are standing under the blistering Egyptian sun, looking up at the towering ancient walls of Abu Simbel, and you are reading them like you're reading a morning newspaper.
He was the absolute first person in 14 centuries to hear what those stones were saying.
So let's bring all of this together. The core thesis from these sources, the absolute why it matters of this entire deep dive, is that Champollion did something entirely unique in human history.
He did.
He didn't just stumble upon a lucky echo of the past, like a farmer accidentally digging up a buried pot or a frozen mummy in the ice.
Right, it wasn't an accident.
He reached back across 14 centuries of total unbroken darkness and deliberately restored an echo that the entire world had completely given up for lost.
He didn't just passively hear the past.
Yeah.
He actively gave it back its tongue.
And if we connect this directly to your life today, every single time you visit a museum and look at an exhibit, every time you read a translated placard next to a sarcophagus, every time you casually know the name of a pharaoh like Ramses or Tutankhamun or Hatshepsut, you are directly, personally benefiting from that specific moment when one young, obsessive man figured out the puzzle and fainted on his brother's floor in Paris.
It all traces back to that one single spark of realization.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought.
Okay.
Something to mull over on your own. that builds entirely on the incredible dynamic we've just explored.
What is it?
For 1,400 years, the most brilliant, highly educated minds on the planet stared directly at a vast library of information and completely failed to read it.
Because of one mistake.
Right. Not because they weren't smart enough, not because they lacked computing power, but simply because they held one single fundamentally wrong assumption about what they were looking at. They thought it was magic rather than mechanism.
Paradigm blindness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, as you look around at our modern world today, what other vast, completely preserved libraries of information are staring us right in the face right now?
That's a huge question.
Whether it's the complex chemical communication of trees and mycelial networks in a forest, or unexplained signals radiating from deep space, or even hidden patterns right here in our own human biology.
What massive libraries are entirely legible, just waiting for us to drop the one wrong assumption that is keeping the door locked.
The signs might be right there in front of us. We just don't know how to read the hashtags yet.
Like an alien hard drive sitting in plain sight just waiting for the right operating system.
Until next time.